Hey, there we go.
Hey, how you doing, Charlie?
So here we go. We've got Brendan, gonna read some talk.
Taz, Scott,
Dan,
Simon, Tim,
and
Dave Barr, how you doing, man? Been a while. Brendan Roy.
Simon there as well.
What's up, guys?
How are you, man?
Hey,
Good.
Got some more coming in. Got
yeah.
Jeremy, Karen. I've got Karen coming in.
Jeremy Greater, my guy.
You alright, Dave?
Karen.
Hello then.
How are you, mate?
Well, thank you. Not bad.
Yes,
Yeah,
Jeremy, how are we doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to see what this is all about.
Good. Me too, me too.
sweet as. So I'll probably give it a couple more minutes, let some more people come in. But yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Really, really excited to get into this. Got a lot of new names as well. Some names we're very familiar with, and some names are new. So it's quite nice to see you all here. We've got
Yeah, it's good. Good. Been a long time coming.
I've got, awesome.
Max in the house. Karen's still connecting. By the way, everyone, make sure you have your chat settings set to everyone rather than just host, or just anyone individually, just so we can all see what each other are saying.
Give it a couple moments as well.
Sure. So it's 7 p.m. here at the moment. What time is it for you guys? Nashville. So what's that like? 1 p.m. How you doing, DR?
Simon's there. 1 p.m. for Dan, and that's
2 people in Nashville.
got Tim says happy to be here. Tim, mate, hope you're doing well, mate. So yeah, we've got Jeremy, 11 a.m. BC, Canada. Awesome. Cool. No first from Nashville. Apparently so Dan, yeah.
What are the chances? I don't know how big Nashville is, but
2 p.m. Toronto from Max.
standard Eastern.
Awesome. And in terms of like, what's everyone's podcast about? Let's get that going. How's
Everyone just throw the names in the chat if that's easier.
See, I was going to say,
How you doing, Karen?
if you guys can put the names of your chat as well, the names of your podcast in the chat, that would be awesome as well. We've got Review My Movies. So Dan, Review My Movies, Words on Film. Okay.
Love that, Dan. The Real Life Buyer, of course. The Fit Mess.
Fitness,
What
yeah.
it became. Come on, all fantastic shows, I can say, firsthand.
Dad's Worldwide, I like that. Fresh Start After 50, I love that, Elba. Cheers to your prosperity, nice. The Black and Unfiltered podcast, awesome, Taz. Then we've got Scott, the New Friends podcast, comedy podcast, the podcast for adults who love to laugh about adulting. Awesome, so we've still got some people coming through. Got Tim.
Those hierarchy of needs. That actually sounds
Okay.
very interesting.
That is
Very intrigued there. I know what I'm doing after this call.
sweet.
Hello, Lujana. Did I get that right? Lujana?
Sweet. And then we've got DR. I'm a podcast manager, but working on a podcast of my own. Going back to graduation class to see if this journey has taken these years. Awesome. I've still got a couple more people coming in, so I'll probably give another minute. Let's see. I hope you all have had an amazing either start to your day or end to your day, like it is for us.
Yeah.
So you've all done amazing. Let's see.
Yeah, I wonder if we've got anyone from Australia in here, where it's like 3 a.m. or something like that. Sephora, love the name of your show as well. Soul Sister Sleep Meditations.
Nice.
It's actually very similar to Jake's. That obviously is kind of the subject of today's workshop.
100%. Let's see.
We'll get onto in a sec.
Awesome. More people coming in. We've got Amy, we've got Jen. Aries, how are you, man? It's going to say I had an interview in February. My guy.
Yeah. It's the same with me. I've got some old faces in here.
Let's see. Great, thanks.
Good
Good.
to hear.
Sweet, this is
Amy, how we doing? The Nerd Couple Show. Love it.
the Nerd Couple show. Nice. Right, I think we could probably...
Yeah.
Yeah, get
Yeah,
up.
5 minutes, I reckon. Let's get cracking.
Yeah. What I'll do, Tyke, is hey Aries, there we go, man. What I'll do, mate, is I'm gonna multiple screen share. I'm gonna make you host so you can let people come in as they go through.
Right, that makes sense.
Yes, there we go. And then I should still. Perfect. Awesome, guys.
Right, can you screen share?
I can, yeah.
Cool.
I was going to say before we really get into this, I want to say thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days, or not so busy days, to come join me and Ty today for this live case study and training as well. We're really excited to really dive straight in to what you got to reveal to you, kind of what we've been working on over the last couple of years, and hopefully help you and improve your podcast in a way you can get the discoverability and visibility of your podcast sky high by the end of this. So without further ado, should we hop straight in?
Yeah, the aim of this is for everyone to come away with some actionable stuff you can take to really start growing. And by the way, shout out to Sapporo. It's 3 a.m. in Japan right now.
Awesome stuff. Let's go.
Love it.
Sweet. Okay. Let me know if you can all see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Sweet.
Right, so I don't think we've got anyone else in the waiting room, which is good.
Perfect. There we go.
Cool. So, big welcome officially now. Let's actually get into the meat of it then. So, how Jake grew his podcast, and Jake is our friend that we met just over a year ago, by the way. He won't be here today, but how he grew his podcast to 300k monthly downloads, which obviously is just mind blowing. Let's be honest. As we can see by the graph here, it was a very, very quick rise to fame, shall we say? And the craziest thing is he obviously did this without any social media or guesting, which is like, you know, the majority of the way people actually grow. So very interesting stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it.
So before we really dive straight into the training, I think it's probably fairly important to kind of give you guys a background on us. You're probably wondering who are these two young British guys and what the hell do they know about growing a podcast? so what we want to do is kind of give you a quick backstory of, you know, who we are and how we got to this point. 4 years ago, I was actually working at McDonald's, and here is a picture, or a mugshot, you could call it, of me working at McDonald's. And, you know, I've always been someone who's very entrepreneurial driven. However, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Didn't really have much direction in terms of someone in my family or close friend to kind of point me in the right direction. And then, of course, we've got Tyg, the absolute wizard with a guitar. This is a very young Tyg, as you can see. And we actually both went through the entire education system together. And, you know, this is us throughout university. So we went to university together. I ended up doing sports science, which was absolutely probably the worst mistake of my life. And Tyg went on to...
Well, I actually did maths. I actually switched to music though a few weeks in, because who does not want to do what they love, right? Realised that early. But anyway, on with the story.
So whilst I was at university, I genuinely just felt lost, frustrated, didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. And of course, halfway through our university experience, Rona, as I'm sure you guys are familiar with, occurred, and that kind of put a halt on things. And this is a point in my life where I felt very stressed, anxious about the future, and not necessarily about, you know, about the global pandemic, but more so where I was going in terms of direction of my life. I wasn't getting the fulfillment from university that I thought I would do. I was working day and night for a degree I knew I was never going to use. So when COVID hit, actually gave me the opportunity to kind of explore different options. And that's where I found stuff that I could do online. And that's kind of how I discovered publishing online. A lot of you who are in here would know me and Ty primarily for our best-selling books, podcasting, and simple podcast marketing. So this is kind of how we got into this. And, you know, I found the business, you know, publishing, and I thought it was a great way, one, for us to help more people and make an impact. But honestly, to be totally transparent, it was also a great way for us to make an income online. So I rang Tyg, gave him a quick pitch, told him what this is all about, and for whatever crazy reason, he decided to actually pull through and start investing in this business with me. So we published our first book, Every Podcast is the Biggest Hurdle, which took us months on end to do, with a lot of time, energy, and thousands of dollars. And when we launched, it actually came crashing down, which honestly, if anything, it made us start having a lot of self-doubt on whether or not we can actually make an impact to podcasters. Can we actually provide value? And we started to get this imposter syndrome because we weren't podcasters ourselves. So having our first book fail it was a massive hit in the gut, to be totally honest. Thankfully, we actually published another book alongside that known as Podcasting Made Simple, which went on to become a huge success and actually became a best-selling book, which I think we can probably both speak for, helped us massively overcome our limiting beliefs on whether or not we can actually help podcasters and provide them value and help them massively. So this also gave us access to a huge array of the community who were, well, you've all been extremely supportive throughout this entire process, throughout this entire journey. And that brings us to where we are today.
And yeah, like they say, the rest is history. So obviously, the book thing has quite taken off for us. We now have five and counting, of course. 2 bestsellers along the way, but most importantly, we've helped, and honestly, this baffles me every time I say the number. We've managed to help over 10,000 podcasters grow and start their shows through our books, which obviously, and you guys can all relate, to creating an impact on a larger scale and kind of, that parasocial relationship and helping people through the masses. It's a beautiful feeling, and we're grateful to be here and to be doing what we love full time. But of course, the natural progression is, you do all these books, and we have this community of podcasters. People start asking to work with you, and to have your personal help, which brings us to kind of where we are now.
So, of course, what I've actually got here is just some screenshots of the students that we've helped one-on-one working to implement some of the strategy that we've learned along the way. And, I really want to just show this because I'm a firm believer in show, not tell. I think it's much better to show you guys the results of the student that we've helped grow, rather than just saying, there's a lot of people within the podcasting space who I'm sure we're very aware of talk a massive game but have nothing to show for it. So anything that we say is backed by data from the results of our students. And this is actually Jim, who was able to cross 100,000 with an amazing show that we worked with him to implement. And of course, this is Raven, who actually, funny enough, implemented exactly what we're going to be breaking down in this live session today. And last year, she actually quit her podcast because she was feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and she wasn't getting the fulfillment. The New Year's came along. She implemented exactly what we're about to break down to you, and her show absolutely exploded. And we've also got Drew here. He's an amazing guy, helped him monetize his podcast effectively as well. So just wanted to show you guys that, so you know that we've done a fair bit in this space, and we've really got the results to kind of back that up as well.
And that brings us again to where we are today. So after lots of trial and error, lots of battle testing, you could probably say, we've really whittled it down to 4 painfully simple steps to really growing a highly engaged and thriving podcast. And obviously, this is not a one-size-fits-all. So we're not saying if everyone does the exact same things, they will get the exact same results. But there is a foundational 4 things that if every single podcaster, and I really do mean every type of show, whether it's entertainment, education, true crime, comedy, if every single show did this, they would see tremendous growth. And SEO is actually step 2 of this. And that's what we're going to be going over today for 2 reasons. One, it's the quickest to implement to actually see overnight results. And we're not about that whole get rich quick, get loads of listeners quick. But it's something that you can take away and you can start implementing right after this workshop and see some results. Secondly, it's coincidentally what Jake did to grow to 300k monthly downloads. So obviously it's going to be the subject of this workshop. And we're going to be breaking it down in, like I said, painfully simple steps.
And of course, with these 4 steps, we were wondering, if you've ever wondered, what is the difference between the podcasters who have managed to easily break, 10,000 monthly downloads per month, and those who are still kind of struggling to figure out the marketing side and the growth side of the podcast. And it really does come down to these 4 fundamental steps. So, of course,
yeah, well, here we have it. So, just a bit of context. So, obviously, Jake Ward, our old friend who has the Send Me to Sleep podcast. So, well sleep, your stories, meditation and hypnosis kind of thing. He started it in the height of the pandemic, actually very similar to when we started our journey in the podcasting space. And of course, the numbers just speak for themselves. He has got crazy results simply from doing SEO. So, no big guests, no guests at all, actually. No social media, no begging people, his family, friends, guests, everything in between to share and listen to the show. Simply very clever SEO. and we learned a lot from him. And embarrassingly, we actually didn't really pay any attention to SEO before coming across Jake and really learning his story. It's a very different story now. Yeah, and yes, Dan, I feel you. I can say you're definitely not alone with that. We've really powered through it as well. So yeah, hang in there. There's better things. Let's get talking, Anthony.
So what exactly did Jake actually do? So Jake figured out what search terms his audience were using to find his content online. And he actually used these keywords using keyword research tool to find the keywords and then included them in his title that were most frequently searched. And the three things that Jake really focused on for this is, number one, using data as much as possible. Now, this is something that I know that I was definitely scared about when I was first initially working one-on-one with students. But data is so important. You think about all the big companies in the world, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're all running data. And for us as podcasters, you get given analytics, and it's important to use those analytics as well as the data in terms of search volumes for certain keywords to use within your title. And that's exactly what Jake did. And then it's also important to think about other SEO channels. So a clever way that you right now can start leveraging, for example, like a form, like one of the biggest form, Quora, is by looking at some of your past episodes, going onto these, forms, typing in a very popular question within your niche, and then actually answering that question and then directing that kind of search volume for that question to the podcast as a more in-depth breakdown for them to receive more value. And then finally, optimizing your show for user engagement. I want to make something very clear right now as well. If we're going too fast or you don't quite get something, please do let us know in the chat, because we want to make sure that before we move on to the next part, you guys are super clear.
So why no one pays attention to SEO? Because, obviously with results like these, one might think, well, why is not more people talking about this? Why are more podcasters not doing this? And actually, as I go through these, I'd love for you to share your opinions on SEO. Any preconceptions? Have you tried using it? Well, basically, what are your thoughts? I'd love to know. But what we found from speaking to literally thousands of podcasters is a very common thing that SEO is too much for podcasters to worry about. Seems to be a common opinion. And we have Martin in the waiting room. It all comes down to a very common misconception that you have to be an absolute expert or very, very tech savvy at SEO to actually effectively use it. And that quote above, SEO is too much for podcasters to worry about, I'm surprised, because I've actually heard some very big podcast educators in the space actually use this quote. And people don't realize how important data analysis is and SEO is when it comes to growing. A lot of people think you can just do the other stuff and really have good growth. And obviously, I'm not saying that has never happened before. But SEO is the foundation, right? Because SEO is really what grows your show passively and allows you to be found easily. So if you don't have that, you're really fighting against the tide. And finally, not having a proven way to simplify and apply the strategy in a way that actually works. So even if you know the power of SEO and you know it's important, often you might not still take that action. You might not still take that step towards doing something about it because it's just like a massive mountain to climb, right? Especially when you don't know where to start. You don't really know many other podcasts that have done it. I don't need to go on. So the best counter argument to all of that, and what we found and what we were like I said, almost embarrassed about after talking to Jake in length, is actually for podcasters, the majority of the results you can get from SEO comes from the absolute basics. You only need to know the absolute basics. Even the things regarding website and blogs and all that stuff, we're not, we're going to touch on it. It's going to be mentioned because it is relevant, but it's not going to be the main part of this. What we're going to be doing is way easier and simpler. If you're running like an e-commerce store online or something like that, then you might need to pay attention and hire an SEO expert and stuff like that. But just to get your podcast on page 1 of search results, all you really need is the basics. And we've seen it with many of our students, which, of course, take it away.
So again, like Tyke said, a lot of the times people think it's overly complicated or too much. And like we said, we felt the exact same way before meeting Jake, and we needed a way to simplify. So this is an entirely new way to kind of view SEO and look at this, a new way to implement it as well. And of course, we've got William. He says here, he broke down the world of SEO to me in a way that anyone can understand. Thanks, Will. That's a big piece of my ego, so I appreciate that. And then, of course, we've got Toby here, who just talks about how he felt like he was hitting a download ceiling, and then Tig had just after 1 hour consultation session with him and gave him the SEO advice that he needed to start to scale his podcast and take his growth to the right direction. And then, of course, we also have Raven now. Raven absolutely blew this out the park. Like I said, at the end of last year, she was actually quitting her podcast because she felt overworked, overwhelmed, and she was doing all this hard work and grunt on social media, but she just hit a ceiling and couldn't grow anymore. It wasn't until the New Year's where she realized, hang on a minute, I can start implementing what we worked on together and do the work and implement SEO. And she was able to then start leveraging the traffic that was already on these platforms like Apple and Spotify and direct that traffic to her podcast. And as we can see, she saw an increase of 465% in the last 90 days. And you can see the graph here. And that's a very short period of time for this to take place.
So with that all said, hopefully everyone sees the kind of results that we can achieve with SEO and how it actually can be broken down very simply to get some big results. But just to clarify, in case anyone doesn't know, and sorry if you already do know this, SEO simply is search engine optimization. So it really just means taking a piece of online content and optimizing it through keywords, so search engines like Google can organize and rank content depending on how relevant they are to specific keywords. And it's very important to clarify here, as kind of going through this workshop. A keyword is simply a search term. So a keyword means the exact same thing as just something you would type in on Google or YouTube or a podcast if you were looking to find something. And a keyword can just be a phrase, so multiple words can be a keyword. Just wanted to get that across.
Awesome. And then, of course, how does it work? So, for example, like Tig said, search terms. So you have stuff like, how to meditate for beginners. If you're trying to rank for this keyword, this tells Google that your page is for beginners who are interested in meditation. So when someone comes onto Google and searches this phrase in, Google will display this website or blog or podcast in this case as part of the search results.
So how does SEO actually work? So obviously there's a lot of other websites, blogs on the same topic, of course, trying to rank for the same keyword. So the search engine will organize and rank them in terms of how relevant they are to that particular keyword. More on this. So you're probably wondering, how does that relate to, obviously that's Google and that's for websites, blogs. So podcast streaming platforms, it's actually a bit more simple, to be honest. So they do it in a very similar way. So they use certain metrics to determine how relevant your podcast is to a certain keyword. So this means if your show is about something, if you have an episode about something very specific and you've basically conveyed that well in your title and in your show description, you're going to be rewarded by the search engines like, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because if someone is looking for an episode about that particular topic, yours is just kind of clean cut and yours is very easy to find as a result. And those search directories know that your episode is going to be highly relevant to what that person is searching. Hopefully that makes sense.
So just right now, could you guys just give us some feedback? So are you guys getting this? Is it all making sense so far in terms of how SEO works and what exactly it is? Just wait for some. Yes, understood. All good. Perfect. This is great information. I'll try to chat. But currently, hope you're doing great, Max. They got Jeremy. I get it, but didn't know how to make it work. Simon making sense. Elizabeth, nice, clear explanation. Perfect, guys.
Okay, awesome. And Jeremy, don't worry, my friend. We will we'll get to that, and hopefully you'll not be feeling the same at the end.
So
great to hear, Taz. Yeah.
So it's really important now more than ever to really focus on your podcast SEO. As of 2019, Google has actually started indexing podcast title, meta description, as well as the spoken words, which means people can now search this phrase like, meditation for beginners podcast. And if you've got your SEO in place, you'll not only be discovered on these platforms, but also rank high on Google. And I'm sure you can see the power of this in terms of implementing this effectively.
I think we need to move forward.
There we go.
Yeah, we're back. So how does your show rank? So obviously we said it's very similar. They use certain metrics. So these are title, description, rating, listener retention time. So obviously how much of your episode a listener is listening to, etc. And don't worry, I know that's maybe slightly vague saying and more. We're going to go into meticulous detail on what those things are closer to the end of the workshop. So don't worry, we're doing our stuff, I promise. So the algorithm then combines this information with how relevant your podcast is to a particular keyword, like I said before, to determine where it actually ranks in the search results. And that'll be, whether or not it is on page one, and if so, then where, kind of exactly where it is on page one.
So what, for us and for you, is the goal with SEO? Well, number one, it helps your podcast grow passively. What I like to say to my students is there's really two sides of growing a podcast that we believe. It's the front end, which is the active side of social media. Now, using social media in the right way by actually finding, spaces online where your audience are, creating hyper-focused content that attracts them in, and then directing that traffic to your podcast. That's the daily grind, you could say, of trying to grow your podcast using social media. That's the active side. Then you have the passive side, where's the SEO, where you're able to leverage the traffic. Again, I'll often know, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of daily active listeners using Spotify and Apple, and they're on these platforms. So SEO allows us to set things up in a way where we can rank high and we can leverage the traffic on these platforms and direct it to our podcast, showing our podcast to the people who are actively searching, rather than us trying to convince other people to come and listen. We can show it to people who are looking for the content already. And of course, this helps us rank high on platforms like Apple and Spotify, as well as search engines like Google. And of course, the effects of SEO is phenomenal because it's not just a one fixed thing. It's kind of like a compounding effect. So if you imagine, it's like, let's say, digital real estate. If you have 20, 30, 40 episodes covering a specific topic, you're gathering and giving the algorithm more data to work with to index your show, to rank it for the right and relevant keywords. And then, of course, it gets the algorithm working on your side. Rather than you doing all this hard work on social media, you have these algorithms out there promoting your podcast, recommending it to people who are looking for your content.
Which brings us to really the formula. So the page one search results formula. Probably could have thought of a slightly more catchy name. So it's very simple. Discoverability plus visibility times user engagement equals increased reach. Now we're going to go over these again. We're going to go over exactly what each of these means. I understand that discoverability and visibility might seem a little overlapping. They're actually not in our definitions. And right now, let's talk about the first one, which is discoverability. And just quick hello to the new people who have just joined. There's a couple of new faces that have just entered the meeting. Don't worry, you haven't really missed too much. We're only now getting into it.
Awesome. So yes, the discoverability aspect. So of course, it's super important, like we've mentioned, to have the right keywords / search terms in each episode, by each podcast title. And then of course, optimizing the podcast name, as well as optimizing your show notes to have the relevant keywords. And this helps these platforms index your show. Again, all indexing means is essentially the process in which the information is organized and then ranked for the relevant terms. So of course, the more data you give it to work with, the better it is in terms of indexing your podcast.
And how we actually do this is by conducting keyword research. Don't worry, it's really not as scary as it sounds. It's actually very simple, and you're going to understand it completely in probably within 10 minutes. So you should conduct keyword research to try and find the right terms to try and rank for. And this will maximize your discoverability on all of these podcast streaming platforms, obviously all in the same way. And we search and identify the right keywords, then deploy them in our titles and descriptions. Now, it's very important not just to guess with this. Guessing and actually actively thinking about what people will type in is better than just having no thought to even what people are typing in at all, don't get me wrong. But guessing isn't the most efficient way of doing it. So Raven, in the screenshot Anthony showed before, Raven did know about SEO, but she was just guessing. She just didn't really have anything in place. She actually started losing downloads. So it's very important to get this part right and make sure we're backing things up with data and making sure that there's no guesswork involved. And if we're gonna aim and we're gonna strike and we're gonna hit,
Sweet. So how do we find these keywords? Well, the first thing that we take our students through, and I'd highly encourage you to start doing, is after the podcast you already have out or your future podcast, episode, just think to yourself, okay, what are the 3 main talking points that I can break the show down into? And then think to yourself, what are the search terms your audience will type in on Spotify or Apple to find your content? And then the final part is, which is extremely important, is to use keyword research tools to actually validate if it's a good keyword or not. And what we identify as a good keyword is as a keyword or search term that has high monthly search volume.
Yeah. So the first step to actually doing this, conducting keyword research, is again very simple. It's just to simply brainstorm keywords, and that doesn't mean you just have to just sit there and think. You can do, and like we said, just doing that alone and just thinking of how to title your episode in terms of if someone was looking for the topics discussed in my episode, what would they actually type into the search bar, right? Then that's going to be way better than not doing anything at all. But you can basically just cheat and just use Google and just type in. So obviously we've got meditation in this example. You could just type in meditation into the search bar and just see what else comes up. Obviously, Anthony's been checking out some meditation cushions. Good.
All right,
Did you buy
guys.
one?
I didn't buy one, no. I wasn't
Yeah.
sold.
Damn. Yeah, but we can get loads of ideas just from doing this. Yeah.
And then, of course, it's really important with most things in podcasting to actually be specific with the keywords you use for your show. It's so much easier when you can rank high when you have less competition. And let's say we're going to go for meditation. That's a super broad keyword, and you'll have countless other people trying to rank for that exact same term. And this is kind of just the visual representation of just why it's so important to be specific. For example, if you go from meditation all the way to the most specific one, which is Kundalini meditation for anxiety, the search results in terms of how many people you're competing with is over 300 million for meditation. For Kundalini, it gets a bit more specific, so 17 million. Kundalini meditation is 18 million. And then, of course, you have Kundalini meditation for anxiety, which is 4 million. Now, I'll be honest, that's still a lot of search volume, but
Yeah, great. I really want to compete with 4 million people. That sounds amazing.
But you know, out of the two, in terms of 4 million for 300 million, I think you can see why, you know, I personally would much rather go for the one where my odds are significantly better.
And of course, just not forgetting also, by doing that, we still hit meditation as well. So you get the best of both worlds either way. So if you're going to use Kundalini meditation for anxiety, you actually still rank for meditation and Kundalini separately, and meditation for anxiety and anxiety, you know, all of those things. So yeah, you get the best of both worlds. And of course, kind of just coming off the back of what I was saying before about, you know, just using Google to help us out with ideas, we can also just go Kundalini 4 or meditation 4. And you know, you can take this and run with it, and you could go, how do I, and then type in meditate and then see what else comes up. You know, you can get a bunch of ideas. So just have this in mind when you're doing the research, because if you use that, you really shouldn't be short of ideas at all. Obviously, because there's suggestions for everything. You can also use the related searches, as we can see on the right.
Yeah, and it's important to know that these are vital in terms of creating a content strategy, because what Google is actually essentially telling you is these are the topics within your niche or within your specific topic that are getting loads and loads of traffic to them. So that's why it's so important as well. And of course, we have, you know, the keyword research tools. So you have stuff like Google Trends, which kind of tells you the monthly search volume. To be totally honest, it's not the best tool. It's just, it gives you a bit of a rounded up ideas, not as specific. And then you've got Google Keyword Planner, which gives you keyword ideas. We have auto suggestions, which is like what Ty was talking about earlier, where it's Kundalini 4 space. And then everything below that is the suggestion that Google's giving you. And then we also have related keywords as well. And this can generate high traffic content ideas that you can start using for your podcast. And then you have paid versions, which is stuff like Ubersuggest, which helps you see the search volume for specific terms. So if you're struggling to pick between two keywords, in just a moment, you see how powerful using something like Ubersuggest is for that.
Yeah, and Ubersuggest helps us to pick keywords by showing us, you know, just basically how often they've been searched in much more detail than some of the other ones like Google Keyword Planner. And by the way, you can actually use this for free. So we highly recommend it. And obviously, actually, this goes to what you're saying, DR. So yeah, there are some Chrome extensions. We've tried a few. We found Ubersuggest to be the best. And just to kind of illustrate an example, so this actually was with one of our past clients. And this was, so basically we just changed some of the wordings in her titles, and even just changing, basically, swapping out synonym phrases. So stop being stressed was what was currently in the title. And we found that was being searched 170 times a month, or something like that. Compared to how to reduce stress, which obviously you can see the difference, right? And yes, Charlene, of course you can contact us. Contact us on Facebook, in the group, or if you want to email, you can email Daniel at daniel-larson.com. But yeah, no worries if you have to leave early. I hope you found it useful so far. But anyway, so hopefully everyone can see here, the simple difference between, just basically using data to check stuff. And no matter what you might think people are typing in, it might just be something that means the exact same, but just worded slightly differently. And it can make the world of a difference when you're deciding how to title your episodes.
Awesome. And then, of course, not only do we optimize our titles for SEOs to have the right keywords, but it's also important to optimize your website as well. Now, like we said, we don't want to overwhelm you, so we want to keep things very simple. And this really is the basis that you need to implement if you want to see the big growth. So number one, you should try to create standalone blogs and articles for each of your episode. Number two, you need to ensure that each podcast episode has its own web page. So instead of having a web player that you click on, you can listen to all your episodes. When someone goes onto your website and clicks the web player, it should take them to a separate web page. Now, again, this helps us massively because instead of having just one basically homepage trying to rank for a specific keyword or search term, you can have 50 to 100 different web pages. And again, it gives Google a lot more data to work with to know that, okay, this domain is highly relevant for this topic. And then, of course, find 5 to 7 relevant keywords and sprinkle them into your show notes to help the algorithm kind of index the work that you're doing. And then, of course, you can also link past episodes within your show notes, which creates this nice ecosystem and something known as backlinks, which I'm not going to go into too much detail with. So, but do these 4 things and you start to get more visibility on Google as well as get more visibility on Apple and Spotify.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of a checkpoint then. So what we've covered so far, SEO allows us to channel organic traffic already on streaming platforms, the best kind of traffic, because you don't unlike social media, where you have to convince someone to leave their social media and go on a different platform to listen to the show. These people are already on the platform ready to listen to a show, so it's perfect. It's important to be specific with the keywords we have in our title. Like we say, we can eliminate competition and stand out more to the people who are actually searching for a more specific thing. Show notes should act as a standalone blog, and each episode should be hosted on a separate web page, so a separate link on your website have its own page for each episode. And it's very important to use keyword research tools to validate the keywords we have in our titles. So, does this make sense to everyone so far? Are we all following? Is there anything? Any thoughts? Any questions?
Want to make sure.
Yeah, let's have some.
So you got yes, making sense, perfect, Rick. Let's see. So Rick, I mean, I'll take that as I'll take it as Rick speaking for the whole. But everyone, there we go. A lot to digest. Yes, it makes sense. Awesome, Simon. Perfect. This is great information. I did not know. Amazing, Alberg. Glad. Let's see. Sweet. Awesome. So that's step number 1 done. So that's discoverability all sorted. Now it's time to look at the visibility of your podcast. Now, all this essentially is kind of looking at your podcast as a whole in terms of now you're easily discovered, you rank for the right terms, but how do we make sure your show stands out? And you can do this by 2 different ways. Number 1, creating an attractive cover art that increases the visibility plus the perceived value of your show. So new listeners, when they view your podcast and the first thing they see when they search something in is a bunch of different results. Having an amazing cover art means you're easily visible and increase the perceived likelihood of them actually clicking on the show and listening to your podcast over our competitors. And of course, having an attractive title that actually incentivizes someone to click. So the analogy to think about this is almost like, imagine you're going to a supermarket and you want to go for a picnic. And so you go to the fruits aisle. Now you're at the start of the fruits aisle and you're looking for strawberries, and they're right at the end. So this is kind of like the strawberries are, they can be discovered and the same with your titles having the right keywords, you can be discovered. But if they're not right at the front of the fruit aisle and they're easily visible, it's unlikely that you're going to find them and eventually purchase them. And then, of course, imagine you have all these strawberries here. You kind of want the one that stands out the most. So this is honestly, looking at this now in hindsight, we should have made all the other strawberries probably grey, and then the one in the middle red. However, the point here is you want something that stands out and really catches the eye straight away. And that's what you're kind of doing with your cover. And then with your actual title episode, it's like you could either have delicious straws, tasty strawberries for picnic, Austin Tasties, red sunshine, and then berry burst. Now, of course, we want the strawberry for picnic, so we're going to pick that one because, again, it's speaking to us and our needs, and that's what your title needs to be doing as well.
Great tune, Dan. And yeah, so here's a bit better illustrated example. So obviously, this is a book that came out in, I should know this, I think it was the 1980s or 90s. So Astrological Love by Nora Hayden. So any guess as to what this book is about? Throw them in the chat.
Yeah, that's it.
Going past the obvious of astrological love. And on a keyword level, obviously that's not going to be anything that people are outwardly looking for. But just thinking of the cover alone, it's okay. Knowing your love match. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable assumption. Any other takers? 3, 2, 1. Right, the big reveal. So actually, hang on a second, Anthony. So before we move on to the next slide, so what happened here was this book flopped hard for a number of reasons. But essentially, it was actually a really good book because a very successful publisher read the book, thought it was fantastic, and basically offered to buy the rights to the book off Nora Hayden. And then just remarketed the book. I think he relaunched it, did a different cover, different title, and let's look at the result. What a change! What a change! Like it's a night and day difference, right? I'd love to know people's thoughts on that. I mean, it's just completely different, isn't it? Even the topic, right? So you would have never guessed by looking at Astrological Love that it's actually about how to satisfy a woman every time. But we're going to go on to the title. Yeah, tell me about it, Dan. But we're going to go on to the title in a bit. Let's not even touch on the title for now. Just on a cover basis, do we feel like this stands out more than the other one? If you go to the next slide, Anthony. Do we feel like, which one do we feel like sticks out more on the shelf? Which do you think is bolder? And which do you think implies that there's a very professional and high quality product inside? We can just go a 1 or 2 in the chat. 2 is the red one, 1 is the white one.
2.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry, we're going to pick apart the title in a bit, Rick.
Sweet.
So yeah, of course, it's a night and day difference, like we said. And ultimately, a great podcast cover has to be J.R. Sparrow in the room. So a great podcast cover needs to be eye-catching, very professional, and I just want to say, it doesn't matter if your show is just having a laugh with a friend, you're still going to have more success if there's a professional cover because it looks like the product inside is going to be high quality. And high quality doesn't have to mean really serious, right? Which is sometimes a connotation when we say professional. Not always, but just wanted to put that out there. And of course, it has to relate to your brand and audience, right? It needs to go with who you are and your brand and your show and that kind of thing. You don't want to confuse new listeners. That's like the worst thing you can do. And Anthony, if you want to hammer down the last point.
Yeah, and of course, not all cover arts are created equal. So what actually went ahead and done is looked at within the fatherhood niche and looked at different podcasts and kind of looked at their covers. And I wanted to show you some examples of different covers that evoke different emotions. And for me, I personally feel like, the first 2 look super professional, evoke some form of emotion and makes me feel something instantly and kind of grabs my attention. And then we have the third one, which again, is doing great, top 5% in listener, which is, is doing great. But in terms of the cover, it still has that, to me, that homemade feel that doesn't feel quite as professional as the other two. Now, again, this is nothing to do with the product. It's in terms of how we market it. And you have to think from a new listener's perspective. This is what they're seeing. They have different options. So it's really important to have a cover that grabs them and hooks them straight away.
And just some things to think about to kind of, I don't know, solidify this a bit more is, does it evoke emotions? Does it have strong colors? Does the image resonate with what you're doing, your target audience? On the opposite, does it feel homemade? Now that is a total put off, as we can tell. People are always going to choose the thing that looks like the thing that looks like there's a high quality product inside, rather than something that doesn't. And it's just as simple as that. And there's no, it's hard to pinpoint what constitutes homemade, but I think we all kind of have an eye of having been on the internet so long and worked stuff like that, to pick out something that does look a bit homemade compared to something else. And lastly, does it represent your brand? Again, kind of going with the evoke emotions. Does it actually feel like you, and is it true to you and what you're doing?
Sweet. So what we've got is how to get 10 out of 10 cover arts. So there's two options really. Of course, the one we're all familiar with, which is Fiverr. And of course, with Fiverr, you can just go on these platforms, find an artist or a designer that you like, and then get that design to give you different variations. And then you have a high budget, which really is a high budget, but this is what we work with our students with, and we believe is the best option for you if you want to really take your cover art to the next level. And with 99 Design, what actually happens is you put in an application, you give them all your details, and you have 30 to 90 different designers opt in and give you a ton of variation and different designs for your podcast. And then you can create a poll, a competition, and then you pick a winner. And we actually took one of our students through this process. So this is the Fiverr covers. Again, you can have a look at some different covers that you can get and do and how they look and stuff. And then, of course, this is 99 Designs. And I think, Tig, this is actually one of your clients, right?
Yeah. So this is the Personal Development Mastery podcast. And as we can see, so this is just some of the options he's had from 99 Designs. And Simon, trust me, it honestly never lets us down. We've used it so many times. So as we can see, the cover on the left, it's fine, it's not that bad, but it does look a bit homemade compared to the stuff on the right, in my opinion, especially covers 1 and 2. So he's actually gone with number 1. And his podcast is looking a lot more attractive now, and it's reflected in the results in his downloads. And again, it's just about exuding that there's something high quality and professional inside, and that's really what it comes down to, as we saw with a book example. So this is a great example of 99 Designs being used, and don't worry, you get way more than 3 covers, more like times that by 10 and then double it again. You literally get so many covers to choose from, so many that actually makes it quite hard. But yeah, anyway, on with it.
And yeah, and like Tig said, whether we like it or not, we do judge books by their cover, and that's just how it is, unfortunately. So I have to play on that human, that human psychology. So now that we have the podcast visible, what next? Besides the cover, this really does come down to having an extremely attractive title. So it's not just good, being discovered, seeing, you also need to, create a title that really pulls someone in and gets them to click and listen to the podcast.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to my favorite example. So if you're still here, still paying attention in the chat, why do you think the second title is so much more attractive than the first? What quality does it have that the other one doesn't? I'd just like to hear some thoughts first, and then we'll get into our thoughts. More targeted, hell yeah. It's way more targeted, right? It actually says who it's for. Yeah, for sure. Both great answers. The second title I can't speak. The second, yes, yeah. Honestly, I couldn't agree more with all 3 so far. So the second title tells you what's in it for you, right? So by looking at the second book, obviously, and this is cover aside now, just based on titles, we know exactly what we're going to get out of the book, right? It has a solution, like you said. This is a big problem. I'm sure all the ladies in the chat know it can be quite a big thing. But this book clearly lays out what you're going to get out of it and how it's going to fit. How it's going to fix the problem by giving you the solution. It definitely has a more inclusive outreach. That's a great point as well.
That's fine.
And obviously, when and when we compare this to Astrological Love, where it's really, and don't get me wrong, like there's nothing wrong with using a title like that if you want, but if you do, in the interest of getting the word out there about what you're doing, yeah, I mean that's another question. We're doing another workshop on that. Astrological Love is so broad, right? It's so subjective and vague, and we have no idea what the book's about. So why would someone commit so much of their time and and a little bit of money as well to actually go in and reading that? Like literally, what's in it for them, and that's what it comes down to. Whereas on the second one, we can see that very, very clearly. And just kind of last thing before we move on, if this was, if these books were both on Amazon, obviously I think back in the day Amazon wasn't around, but the second one will cater a lot better to keywords as well, right? Because no one is going to be typing in Astrological Love unless they're like LSD or something like that. But someone might be typing in, if they have the problem, they might type in how to satisfy a woman. Or, they maybe they use something similar. Maybe this guy should have used Ubersuggest. But we get the point. It caters a lot more to keywords.
And a final point that we really want to hammer down home, this isn't just important for SEO, although it's vital for that, it's also extremely important when you're trying to market your podcasts and episodes online, because at the end of the day, the title of the episode is what people are clicking in for. So not only are you going to be ranking high for these terms and increasing visibility, but when it comes to marketing your podcast and episodes, it's far more effective for you to grab the attention of the people you're trying to reach, and it doesn't leave any space for error or anything like that. So it's far more effective with the marketing side on social media as well.
So just a little side note here. In a few minutes, after some more, after we get through some more of this content on how to title your episodes, we're actually gonna be looking for some examples from you guys. So have a think. If there's any title that maybe it's one of the ones with less downloads, or maybe you think it's really good, but it just didn't go as well as you thought it would, let's bring it to the table, and we're going to have a look at how we could improve it based on what we're going to go over. But that's just something to think about for in a few minutes' time. Just putting that one out there now. So we'd love to get some titles forward. But anyway, so how to title your episodes? So obviously, first we conduct keyword research, right? We find out for sure, not by guesswork, because otherwise you could get into stop being stressed, how to reduce stress kind of problem. We do our keyword research. We find out factually what people are searching in, and how we can then incorporate that into our title to be very, very visible. And we actually fit the keywords into the title so it sounds coherent. So obviously we don't just want to keyword stuff. We want to craft a title that is compelling and is attractive, and like the title of the other book, makes people want to go and consume the product, right? Because they know what they're going to get out of it.
Sweet. So what makes an irresistible title is these points here. So your title should contain keywords, pain points, a desired outcome, which is kind of what's in it for your listeners from their perspective. What are they going to gain from this? And then, of course, it should deal with objections people might have for that particular episode. And then it should also have a clear target audience who you're trying to reach with it. And these are kind of different types of titles that we can come across. So we have super targeted and specific titles, and then we have confrontational and polarizing titles, and we have titles that build massive intrigue. We're going to show you some examples in a second, but for now, I think the best thing for you to really focus on, that's the easiest one to get your head around, is having super targeted and specific titles. So here are some examples of students that we've helped go through this exact same process.
So our first example, so we have how to quickly reduce anxiety and live stress-free with Kundalini meditation for beginners. So this is just an example, if that's what the episode is about. And we have our keywords, we have Kundalini meditation, anxiety, the pain point, the reason people are coming to the episode, which is something to think about as well, is they have anxiety or they have stress, and they're looking to obviously alleviate that. They want to stop feeling anxious, right? That's the desired outcome. So now we know what they want to get out of it. Now we can craft it in a way that it's going to basically sell that episode to them, right? Sell that episode over all the other stuff they're going to see when they're looking on Apple Podcasts. So here's how we've come up with something like how to quickly reduce anxiety and live stress-free with Kundalini meditation for beginners. And another example is how to reduce anxiety with 10 minutes daily Kundalini meditation for beginners. Now, do you think it's a long title? I think that's interesting. I think it's on the longer side, but I think it's very much within reason. I've seen a lot of episode titles that are like that. But what I'd be wondering is, what's everyone's opinion on the 10 minutes daily? Do we think that makes it sound more attractive or less attractive, or what are people's thoughts? And Anthony, what do you think of Karen's question?
Much more attractive. So let's have a look. Hey Karen, hope you're doing good. So after 107th episode, are you suggesting we start naming them differently and should go back? So this is what I would personally say, if with our students, is you should, I believe, if you want to get the same sort of results, is really thinking, okay, I've got all these titles, you can go back and change them, and you will start to see an increase in your downloads in the next 7 days to a month, because you're targeting the right keywords and because you're actually being exposed to the people who are looking for that content. So my advice would be, yes, to go back, revisit a lot of the titles, and then apply this framework to it. It does take some time, but it's definitely worth it. Like I said, Raven ignored this to begin with, and she was having a hard time trying to grow her show, doing all this legwork on social media. But she then realized after implementing this, she can just leverage the podcast, the traffic already on these platforms. And I hope that clears things up for you, Karen.
Yeah.
So would it make a difference? So yeah, we've got a good question here. So would it make a difference, an SEO difference, to reduce anxiety 10 minutes daily meditation with Kundalini meditation for beginners? If it read, I don't know. So it wouldn't do, as long as you have the right keywords there. But of course, we're trying to craft the title in a way that's most attractive for our listeners.
And just before we move on, so Dave, so about the Buzzsprout thing. So I believe, and I can't say for sure actually, but I think that would just be because of basically the first thing, almost like a thumbnail of the title. It would just be the first part of the title. So a long title is still better, but it just means what that 30 character thing means is that you would want the first 30 characters of your title to basically grab people instantly, which is why something like How to Quickly Reduce Anxiety is fine, because obviously the extended title is even better. But just if someone sees alone How to Quickly Reduce Anxiety, they're still going to be pulled in, right? I hope that makes sense. But obviously a title, I just think straight up a title should definitely be longer than 30 characters, so I wouldn't worry about that. So here's some examples. So this is actually some student transformations. So an episode title that one of our students had before was Manifesting More Efficiently. And after, what it was why law of attraction isn't working for you and how to fix it to start manifesting. So obviously we have the keywords, right? We have manifesting and law of attraction. And obviously she already had manifesting in there before, so it could have been worse, right? But the pain point wasn't in there. So law of attraction not working for people. So, and this is what I like to call a punch in the face, right? Why it starts with something like why law of attraction isn't working for you. Because it honestly feels like a punch of a face. And if you read in that, if law of attraction isn't working for you and you see that, it's going to grab you, right? It's going to intrigue you. It's going to evoke emotion, like almost like what we were saying with the cover before. And of course, we talk about the desired outcome. So we say basically what people are going to get out of listening to this episode. And if we can relate this back to the book, how we're talking about how the title, what it did really well was it showed people what the solution was, told them what they're going to get out of consuming the product. It's exactly the same here. So how to fix it to start manifesting, that's really intriguing, and that's really going to make people feel like this is worth their time listening to. And of course, it's slightly different if someone is already a long-term fan of your show. You can kind of get away with being a bit more vague, talking about things that maybe aren't as close to the person's problems. But that's if they are already a fan of your show. Remember, we're marketing for the majority to people that haven't yet heard of your show and don't even know who you are. So we need to give them a really strong reason to choose your show over the countless others out there. So, with that said, next example.
And then, of course, we have another student transformation, which is, before it was personal finance fundamentals for entry to mid-level professional with Kirsten Grandosis. And of course, afterwards, it then goes to personal finance tips for millennials to help you achieve your financial goals. Now, the keywords here are, personal finance tips, financial goals, and the desired outcome is millennials wanting financial education to help them maximize their salaries and grow wealth for the future. Now, what we've actually done here is we want to show you how you can actually take a title and turn it up even more to build massive intrigue, which is super important. And also being even more specific. So we're going to take evolution even further. So rather than just personal finance tips for millennials to help you achieve your financial goals, we could have, and again, I'd love to know what all of you think of this, is 5 weird personal finance hacks millennials can use to save their first $10,000. Now we can see how the 5 weird personal finance hacks, that kind of it almost builds intrigue of what are these weird hacks. And of course, using the word hacks instead of tips is kind of talking to what millennials want, is like, little quick hacks that we can get. And then finally, rather than achieve your financial goal, we actually state what that future desired outcome is, which is save their first $10,000.
So Anthony, I think we're going to mention about the guest name as well, weren't we, on that last one?
And as you can see, we actually from the last one, he had Kirsten, which was a guest in the title, but we actually end up removing the guest name for several reasons. Number one, if the guest name doesn't drive high search volume, which essentially means no one's really actively going out typing in Kirsten podcast, then we won't have it within our title. And, it might be that your guest might feel somewhere about that. Or if you're worried that you don't want to disrespect the guest, simply be honest and transparent and let them know, hey, by the way, those extra characters is much better for us to talk to our audience about their desired outcome or address a pain point we're going to be solving. I actually spoke to an SEO expert about this as well to get her full take and opinion. She said, if it doesn't drive search volume and search traffic, there's no point having it in there. Of course, you can add it in the description, and of course, they're also going to be interviewed in the podcast. It's important in terms of your exposure for the episode to think about the best way to reel these new listeners in.
And a good way to just think about that is, obviously there's a bit of an objection that people might find that like disrespectful to the guest, or that kind of thing. And if you do really feel like that, or you feel like the guest would feel like that, the better thing you can do is just to put their name at the end rather than a start. Going back to what we were talking about with Dave a moment ago, you obviously want the start to be the most compelling thing, right? So you want it to start with a big intrigue. And obviously if that guest isn't well known, or if their name doesn't provide an intrigue, then it's really working against you and the guest, who just wants people to listen to the episode, to be at the front of the title. But yeah, so anyway, your turn. So title character limit for various platforms. I'm going to be honest, Dave, I don't know that. Do you know that, Anthony?
I don't know that. I think I don't think there's. I'll probably say. I'm trying to think in terms of characters. I would say go for it to begin with, and just this is actually what I normally practice on with all students. So we normally just make it as long as we can, but then we trim the fat down to have something a lot more concise, if that makes sense. So for this practice, kind of look back at some old titles and see how you can improve it, implementing some of the frameworks we've just taught you. So if it's super long to begin with, that's calm. You can then trim it down in terms of what's the main keyword, what's the main pain point, and what's the desired outcome, and kind of use that to create them. We'll let you have a couple minutes, and we want to see some before and after transformations in the chat. Me and Ty can have a little review and see how people are doing.
Yeah, and just another thing, Dave. So I don't know if this is anything to go by, but book titles, and this is on Amazon, so obviously we know about this. So they need to be within 200 characters, and that's title and subtitle. So I can imagine if there's a character limit, it'll be something similar. And even if there isn't, that's kind of a good spot to aim for. So if you do want a number, I'd say 200 characters is probably the closest thing we can give you. Right. So Anthony, if you've seen what Jeremy said in the chat, so this is great. So thanks, Jeremy. So let's have a think about this then.
Yeah.
So when and how to talk about mental illness in a new relationship with Alison Raskin.
When and how to talk about mental illness. Okay, I'll probably ask you, Jeremy, like what what were the main talking points that you guys spoke about? Was there like, three main things, or was there any steps? Like was there like, three steps, or how many months? I'm trying to think of like how we can quantify in terms of, I guess my mind's kind of going like, or how to talk about mental health, illness, and new relationship.
And there's that. So that's obviously one question I think is very important. Another one is how, and obviously we could all give answers for this, but what do you think would be the desired outcome of this episode, Jeremy? So like, when people want to talk about mental illness in a new relationship, what do they want the outcome to be? Like, I don't know if it's like, basically just a healthy response, or like understanding, or but you can probably describe it a lot better than me. So yeah, let's have a think about
that. Do you want me to respond? I didn't know how much.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah. Cool. So I mean, it's, she has a new book, and it's all about how people that struggle with, depression, anxiety, OCD, you're out there, you're dating. When and how do you bring that up, right? Do you date someone for 6 months and then drop the bomb of, oh, by the way, I have crippling anxiety, and then they run off and you just wasted the last 6 months? Or is it something that, 2 or 3 dates in, maybe depending on how old you are and all that, when do you bring that into the relationship so that someone knows this is what I'm in for if I get into this relationship with this person? And that's either good or bad, right? Like that depends on the person's, how it's received. If they have similar issues, they're like, okay, great, I'm a basket case too, let's work through this together. Or that's deeper water than I want to wade in, but nice to meet you. So that's sort of where the conversation went.
Yeah, I think I'll love to ask you, Jeremy, what were the specific mental health, if you didn't mind sharing, that they spoke about? I think you mentioned a couple.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, the book is aimed at people with depression, anxiety, and OCD.
Then I'll probably try to have, rather than mental health, have something more specific, because mental health, again, is just
very broad
and it covers it. But then when we go into the specific of depression, anxiety, OCD, those are so much more specific, and you're targeting more keywords with that as well, right?
Sure.
So I think that's a great way to maybe get a bit more specific in terms of that turn. And then in terms of the desired outcome, maybe add something along the lines of like, effective communication, trying to fit that somewhere in it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So again, they know that, okay, these are the main talking points. I'm going to improve this area to help me with this thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Awesome. Do you have any more questions around that?
I think that's a good place to start for now. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, awesome, buddy. And then we had a question.
Yeah, so for the people that their show isn't necessarily how to, or more entertainment based, that is totally fine. And obviously, the thing to mention is like, yes, this stuff is maybe slightly easier to come up with if it is a how to, but like we said, this stuff can be applied to any podcast. So would you have like an example of one of your episodes or anything like that, and maybe we can take a look?
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you can't play, so obviously we mentioned all those things before. So pain points, desired outcome, keywords, intrigue. So if you don't think you can be as strong on the pain point and desired outcome, then obviously what you need to focus on is being very intriguing and using relevant keywords where possible. So I'd love to maybe see like a example of an episode or something like that. We can have a look.
I think we've got one here. Yeah, we have. So we've got a nerd couple show. I'm sorry, I don't know if your name's on there. So we've got, I guess, a show how to be a happy nerd couple. So that's the name of her podcast, the name of the actual show itself. Am I getting that right? But if you can give us examples of maybe some title episodes, and then we could work with that. So I said no. Okay, I said yes. Okay, perfect. So the show name is Nerd Couple Show. Have you got any specific episode titles you want us to have a look at?
That would be great, and then we could basically, if we have an example to work with. Okay, so that's pretty cool, Dan. That is a lot of movies in one episode. So I mean, how do you? Okay, yeah, you said before. So you use the date in the just like the episode number. So what I would think about is it was probably going to be too long to mention all 5, right? So you can have that in description. So I'd lead with the most intriguing thing. So what was your most? Did you have like a controversial opinion about? And if possible, go with the most popular film. So let's just for the sake of the example, let's just go with Elvis. So what was like the most controversial thing you thought about watching Elvis, or what did you learn about watching Elvis? Or at what part could you just not stop laughing? So what we need to do is bring out the most interesting part of your content, and then kind of headline that as with the episode and use that to spearhead with. Hope that makes sense.
Awesome. And then we've got why. Great, gives me some good ideas. Awesome stuff, Dan.
Good to hear.
And then of course we've got why are Star Wars fans the best and the worst? Question marks. I would say, with that, could you be a bit more, what's the word? Not necessarily confrontational, but more conviction with the statement you're making. So 5 reasons why Star Wars fans are the best and the worst. You see what I mean? So have a bit more, try to have a bit more conviction, really nail that point home, so that anyone who isn't a Star Wars fan or has a conflicting opinion has to pay attention to what you're talking about.
Yeah. And maybe, again, kind of maybe we can even swap that out for the best or worst. So maybe why Star Wars fans loved or hated or something like that. Maybe that could be kind of a more emotive way of saying that. What do you think? And obviously, that doesn't necessarily improve the keywords or anything like that. But you have that really with Star Wars fans. Again, unless there's some specific things that you're discussing inside, there might not be much more you can do with the keywords if it is just about Star Wars fans generally in the episode. But what you can really do is play on the intrigue and play on the emotions with those ideas that we just gave. So what do you think? Does that help out at all?
Awesome.
So obviously, I know some people are dropping off, and it's been like over an hour. So I think we'll do like maybe one more example if anyone's got one. And Jeremy, just kind of going back to yours, by the way, going back to like the desired outcome. I don't know if you're still there. Something like how to safely navigate talking about your depression, OCD, or anxiety, or you could just use mental health with a new partner. Could be a better way of doing it, because again, that kind of plays on what people want, which is to safely navigate it, or to I don't know. That was just one idea, but I don't know. How to start a new relationship. Yeah, I think that's great. Seriously. Yeah, that's really good. So let's just compare that to the old one. So what do we have? When and how to talk about mental illness in a new relationship. So how to start a new relationship where I live in. Yes, I like that.
Awesome. Boom.
Tell him.
Awesome. Sweet. So
and by the way, so to Nerd Couple Show, so I'm glad that's helped a bit. If you do have any other like episode titles or anything you want to go over, feel free to just, obviously we're going to move on now, feel free to just put them in the Facebook group, or even to just message one of us individually. We'd be more than happy to keep going back and forth with you. And also, that's another great one. See what Dave said. Yeah, so I don't know what that means by customer-facing fields. That that might imply that it's talking about titles, but it's clearly not, because if you go on a podcast on Spotify, you will see things with more than 20 characters. 20 characters is like 3 or 4 words. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would just go with what Apple allows. And also the median podcast title, I also wouldn't pay much attention to that, because again, like, to be frank, most people don't title their episodes very well. So most people are very vague, and most people will just call their episode like When Pigs Fly, or like The Good Life, or something like that, and so obviously that's going to drag the things down, because a lot of people don't know that they should be more specific. So anyway, I think it's probably time we move on then.
So just at this relative point again, so these are some students' results, and this is Nathan, who I spoke to a couple of months back, and he was struggling again with growing a show. And after we had an hour-long session, he finally realised he cares about keywords and more keywords. Hopefully Nathan isn't doing too much keyword stuff in, fingers crossed. But he really spoke about how his episode titles were being buried under a lot of other podcasts within his niche, but now he's able to bring them to the top of the search pile and be found a lot easier. So, of course, what we've covered so far is increasing the visibility of your podcast. So people judge books by their cover. Having an attractive cover are needed.
Mm-hmm. Episode titles that are specific with keywords increase your reach. So again, we do our keyword research, we find out what people are searching, and we put them in our titles, so when people search them, our titles come up.
Awesome. And then, of course, the guest names should only be added if it drives search traffic.
And again, you know, the kind of another way of doing it is just add it at the back if you don't want to get rid of it. But ideally, like we said, remove it if it's not going to help. So there we go. That's our page on search formula. So we have discoverability and we have visibility. So we know how to make your show discoverable through using terms that people are searching for. See you later, Germany. Thanks a lot for coming as well.
Cheers.
Glad you enjoyed, man. And we talked about visibility, right? So we've talked about how to craft a good podcast cover and podcast title so that when people see you on the search engine, they're going to choose you because yours looks very, very attractive. So now, how to increase user engagement to really boost all of this?
Awesome. So, of course, we have ranking metrics that these platforms use to kind of determine how high your podcast should rank. So, of course, you've got the keywords, which is brilliant, but it's important to have high user engagement, like we mentioned. So this covers kind of reviews, the downloads, subscription, and the retention time of the podcast. So we're really trying to boost each one of these aspects we're trying to boost each one of these aspects to the highest level as much as we possibly can. In terms of what retention time means, it simply means what percentage of your podcast on average are your listeners listening to. If you have a podcast that's an hour long, but people listen to 5 minutes and then dipping out, it sends a bad signal to the directory to say, by the way, this podcast is not good or relevant for this particular keyword. So you want to have a high retention time for that very reason. And it makes sense, right? You know, if you're listening to a podcast and the title was meditation, but then the entire way through it's just all about, I don't even know, like washing machines.
So we get the point. We have to give people what they came for to keep people listening, right? So we have to deliver on the promise, and of course that starts by actually making a big promise in the title, like what you're going to get out of it. But we have to keep people around, and we do that through obviously just being a good podcaster, right? The thing that you guys all are, because you've all been at it for a while, you all have great shows, but we need to make sure we're keeping people by giving the people what they want. So any ideas on how we can get more reviews? Pop them in the chat. So any thoughts on how we can basically increase the amount of reviews we have from our listeners? And you know, a similar thing could be said for subscription. So I mean, yeah, like that's the most obvious one, right? We just ask them. So if you have any very engaged listeners or people that you have on social media, or you know, people who are engaging and you can connect with, just reach out and ask for a review, because people will be very, very, very willing, and in fact, really like the chance to be able to give back to you as you've given so much to them with your content.
And a little like pro tip that can help a lot is either a voice note, something that's just a little bit more personable, asking for the request, or a loom, which is just like a recorded video where you say, hey, thank you so much for the support. I'd love to know if you were able to leave a review, and kind of walk them through that process as well. So those little extra things, rather than just texting it, goes a long way in terms of how your listeners will receive the request, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, and you know, the others obviously downloads kind of, but what we're doing is trying to increase downloads. There's nothing specific for that apart from all the stuff we talked about. And subscriptions, it's very simple. You just need to have, or subscriptions or follows, or, you know, different things on different platforms. We just need to have a call to action that tells people, if you like this content, go and subscribe, or go and follow the show at the start and end of the episode. And just having that instruction in there is going to make people a lot more likely to actually take you up on it. And not much more needs to be said on that. It's just very simple that if you don't have a call to action at the start and end of your episode, you should strongly consider doing that to actually up the amount of people that, you know, take action based on your episode.
That's it. And then in terms of retention time, it's, you know, for what I think is the best thing to do is kind of look at your episodes and kind of take a look at the analytics. When do people tend to drop off? So what's your average retention time? If you've got an hour-long episode, but for whatever reason your retention time is at 40 or 50%, I would honestly say the best thing you can do is cut the episode into 2 parts, because your audience are voting with their attention that towards the end, they're either now out of routine, so they're either driving somewhere or going on a walk, and they've finished that activity of wherever it is, and they've stopped there. So having a shorter episode and split up in 2 parts has multiple benefits. Number one, it increases the perceived value of the podcast, because they're not getting halfway through and dipping out. They're finishing it and almost craving more. Number two, it increases your user engagement with your retention time, because instead of, listening to 50% of the episode, they're listening to 70, 80, 90%, which sends an amazing signal to these platforms. And then finally, it just gives you extra content and another opportunity to try to rank for a specific keyword.
So just quickly before we move on then. So firstly, great stuff, Elizabeth. Very, very happy to hear it. And hopefully you've seen some the fruits of that. And to DR, so a lot of back and forth about how many call to actions you should have. Please review, go to my website, etc. Yeah, I definitely hear what you mean. So we're very big advocates for, don't confuse people, just take the most important one and just give them that one, right? Because if you tell people, go follow me on Instagram, go subscribe to my podcast, go drop me a message on Facebook, and also visit my website, people are just going to be put off, right? They're just not going to do anything. So it's better to just focus on one, the most important one, and obviously, you can change it, depending on what time it is. Just take one. So I would say, unless you have a particular reason or other thing you're doing, just at the start and end of each episode, just direct people to give your show a follow. If anything comes up that you would rather them do, obviously that might come up if you have a Patreon or something like that, then you can go there, but definitely only pick one.
Awesome. So I kind of want to just cover the old way versus the new way of thinking about SEO.
Yeah, so the old way, and before this workshop, we have the opinions, right? SEO is all about Google.
No, it's not. SEO plays a huge role in being discovered on streaming platforms like Apple and Spotify.
But SEO is complicated and takes so much time to put into place.
No. The algorithm is actually on your side and wants to push your show to the right people.
But I thought SEO was all about blogs and websites. What?
Well, we can make changes, believe it or not, quickly to increase the visibility by changing our titles and adding in the right keywords.
But SEO is for experts and not for the independent podcaster.
Remember, Tiger, a lot of these people, the SEO experts, make it sound confusing and complicated so they can make a sale. All you need to do is focus on the basic and you'll get the massive results.
Awesome. Thank you for your help.
Sweet. So that's the formula. And in terms of everything we've covered, we've covered what SEO is and why it's so important,
what a keyword is and how to find and pick the right ones, and then on that, how to craft an attractive title that really gets clicks,
and of course what makes a good podcast cover and title,
and how to increase your user engagement to get more eyeballs on your podcast. So everyone, does that make sense? Any questions? Fire away. Does this all make sense? And what have you all been able to take something from this?
Any questions?
DR, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that.
Sweet. See plenty. Let's have a look.
Gioma, Dave.
You two are awesome. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
No,
Chioma, amazing.
So to the Nerd Couple Show. So yeah, we actually do have a service to help people with this stuff. Would you like us to tell you more about it? And we can do that. And Taz as well.
So yes, how can I work with you guys? Perfect. So yes, awesome. So again, at this point, we know we've covered a lot. I hope some of you get this meme, but I know we've covered a lot during this time. So you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed, but hopefully simplify the process. So what we want to do now, since we've already got some permission, is we're going to kind of walk you through what it looks like to work with us one-on-one. if you're a good fit and we're a good fit to work with each other.
So you can buy our SEO optimization 12 framework for 14 grand.
14,000. That's all. That's all it is. That's all we asked for.
Yeah.
For the small price.
Really
we're obviously joking. But seriously, in terms of what it's like to work with us one-on-one, like we said at the start, to us, we just help podcasters who are impact-driven implement a very simple 4-step growth process to grow a highly engaged and thriving podcast. And what you had today was step number 2. And step number 1 really is setting up the foundation for all of this to work wonders. And this is kind of making sure that if you're going to do all your legwork in terms of setting up your SEO, you can maximize the effects of it. Step number 3 is really removing the guesswork from social media. I like to say my new slogan is promoting on social media is dead. It's a lie and makes it very difficult at times to grow. As I'm sure you might feel like you're constantly doing a lot of legwork, but the returns just aren't getting there. Your numbers online don't reflect how the downloads you're receiving on your podcast. And this step kind of resolves that when we show you how to use social media in the right and proper way. And then of course, step number 4 is what we found that 90% of the podcasts that we interviewed in February who had 10,000 plus monthly downloads were viciously executing on. And of course,
shut up, let me talk. Obviously, that's the 4-step growth process. So going back to the question. So this is what we take clients through. So we obviously teach and help people implement this to get some pretty good results, obviously, as we showed a bit at the start. But it's not for any single podcaster. Obviously, there are people who benefit more than others. So people who benefit the most from this, serious podcasters who've already been in the game for a while and are looking for a proven process to help grow their audience fast.
Coachable podcasters who are willing to try new methods that saves them time, stops them guessing, and helps them bypass the frustration and saves them time in terms of trial and error.
Impact-driven podcasters who want their show to be recognized as a leading podcast in their space and are ready to fully commit to get amazing results.
And then finally, talented podcasters who are looking for a proven way to amplify their message, build a high-value network, and monetize their podcast as soon as possible. We want to make something very extremely clear. This isn't a magic formula that you're going to get thousands of downloads overnight. It doesn't work like that. It's a proven process that's backed by data from the students and the results that we've been able to get for them. So, what we're going to do to make this a little bit...
We're only joking with this thing, by the way.
What we want to do is, in just a second, what we're going to do, if this sounds like something that interests you, if this sounds like you'd want to get on a call with us, is we'd like to invite you to a 45-minute, totally free consultation so we can actually look into your podcast directly, reveal the 4 steps to you and how you can apply it to your own, and then see if we're a good fit. Now, again, this is totally free, no obligation at all. It's kind of just seeing where you are and making sure we're right fit. Because at the end of the day, when we want to work with you, if you're happy and you feel like we could actually help you. So to make things fun, in just a moment, I'm going to put the link in the chat where you can actually book in your free consultation. And what we're going to do is the first 5 people who claim their free strategy session, we're going to give you the SEO optimization framework that Raven, Nathan, and other students that we've had, that we give them so they can use to start optimizing and implementing everything we've covered on this. So in just a second, we're going to put that in the chat. Have you got the link, Tyke?
Yeah. I'll pop in the link. Go to the next slide, just to kind of summarize everything. So next steps, click the link below to schedule a free strategy session. So there is the link, everyone. And like we said, the first 5 people, that book in a strategy session, regardless of whether we choose to work together, we're still going to give you one of our resources that we use with our paying clients. So if you book in now, you'll actually get basically a little more than you get out of it. If not, that's still okay, because totally for free, in 45 short minutes, we're going to reveal to you exactly what the 4-step growth process is, and we're going to talk to you about how you personally can apply it to your show. Because like we said, it varies amongst different podcasts. It's not totally one size fits all. So we'll talk about the nuances of your show and your niche and how you can get the most out of it using that. And of course, at the end, we'll visit the possibility of us working together long term if we both feel like it's a good fit. But there's no obligation to do that during the strategy session. You know, there's no hard selling or anything like that. It's really not that kind of thing. It's a great chance for us to show you exactly what the 4-step growth process is and for you to come away and know exactly what you need to do to grow your show. Hopefully that will make sense, guys.
So yeah, so again, the link's right there. I think I just want to take this time as well to actually thank everyone here for showing up. I think it shows and says and speaks volume for the type of podcaster you are. I think we love to dedicate our time to those who are serious about growing their show and are open to discovering new ways of growing the podcast. So honestly, there's been great speaking to you. I hope you've had an amazing got tons of value. So we'll leave this here. If you have any questions about the call, about this session, please let us know in the chat as well. And of course, if you do book in, let us know as well, because that'd be quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you do book in, so your booking will either be with myself or Anthony. You can message us, personally on Facebook or just email. And we'll actually send you over some more training that you can start watching, even just before the call. Some of the stuff we actually give to our paying clients, just to get you prepped and just to basically help you expand your knowledge on growing your show, even before the call. And don't worry, it doesn't even cost a fraction of 14 grand. We're just completely taking a piss with that, and that would be only if we chose to work together anyway. So yeah. It's great stuff. So I hope everyone's enjoyed. Thank you all so much for coming. It's been a fantastic response. Seriously, we've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too, and I hope you've got something out of it. What I said at the start, obviously, the aim of this ultimately is really just to give everyone something they can take away and start to do to grow their show more. So just let me know if we've delivered on that. Cheers, Rick. Appreciate that, man.
Presentation, awesome, Rick. You're the man. Appreciate the support.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, if anyone's still here, I'm chilling. I would love to hang out and get to know you guys a bit more in terms of your podcast, what you do. If you wanted to put your mic off or take off the camera, if you have any questions at all for us, we're all game and all up for it. Thank you so much. Cheers. Awesome. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, you too, Elizabeth. Thank you, Choma.
Amazing stuff. Dave, appreciate you, mate. Suppose again, guy, I've got to take off.
Awesome, Taz. Well, me or Anthony will send you some stuff that you can watch in the meantime, and look forward to chatting in more detail. Thank you, Lou Jane. Sorry, I hope I got that right. I know what it's like to have a name no one can pronounce.
As well as I will, Neri.
Yeah.
Awesome. So still got Dave, Taz, and Junior. How am I pronounce? Yeah, how you pronounce? Is it
Lou Jane, I would assume.
Jane, and then Charlene. Amazing.
Lou Jane, nice.
Hey.
Lovely name, actually. Where's that from? Obviously, your last name definitely indicates it's not Syria. Wow. And where are you living?
So
Paris. Amazing. Oh, so it was what, like 9:30 for you there? Wow.
How are you, Charlene?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so happy. I have such a busy schedule, but my intuition said, watch this.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're doing this, because I've had my podcast for over 2 years, and I have a social media person, but I feel like, I'm running a treadmill that's not on. Mm-hmm. And while I have listeners, and I'm looking for people like you who know what they're doing, and you guys are pretty, how can I say, up to date on what's going on in the social media, the algorithms, the CEO, and I'm rebranding too. I have a podcast called Grief Recovery Now, and I like it. I'm passionate about it. I'd like to learn how to monetize it, either through bringing people in for me to work with, but I'm also rebranding. I'm doing a positive intelligence, which is into my work. So I just don't want to work with grief people in grief, going from heartbreak to heartbreak through, but I've always been in the human potential movement. So how do I rebrand? I'd love your expert piece. I looked you up. I looked at astrologically. You guys are all good. I'm glad you had that. tag on December 5th. I was like, oh, a good Sagittarian. And
Oh, yeah.
Anthony, I think is
Yeah.
Gemini or something like that. So I love you guys, and you guys are young and vital, and I'd like to talk to you. And I took advantage of this, so I think I'm hopefully one of the first 5 for next Tuesday.
Awesome.
And then, you know, and I also need support. So I don't know if you have any contacts in the world that can help me throughout the weeks with social media, SEO. I work with the Ginny Media, who helps me with my podcast, and I need a revamp on, you know, the cover and new title and blah, blah, blah. So that's, I don't want to take the time, and I appreciate you guys. You guys are really good.
No, thank you so much, Arlene. It means
Appreciate that.
absolutely well. I love the accent, by the way, I must say.
Oh, you did. Chicago. I live in LA, but I'm a Chicago girl.
Yeah, no, I like the accent. That's awesome. And I appreciate the kind words as well. Like, you know, like what we said, I think it really is a matter of like keeping up to date with things, but recognizing when things aren't working, because what we see, and it's so painful, is that honestly, a lot of people in the space have amazing shows, like Raven, all the people, you know, all the students we work with have awesome shows, great marketers, great people. It's just that before, it's like, you know, with social media, promoting on it, people don't know how to use it effectively, and it's doing the same thing, expecting the same result, but then not really seeing your numbers grow up, but you put all this time, all this energy into it. And what we've found is that it's really about doing less, not more, and focusing on the important rather than just shotgunning and having this spray gun approach. Let me try this, let me try that. No. Just focus and figure out what's working. And Charlie, you know, whether it's me or Tig, I'm really excited to dive a bit deeper into your podcast and see really what we can do with you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll see you guys, I think it's July 6th or something. Is that next week? Whenever. Yeah. But I love you both, and let me know who I would be talking to. I'd love to talk to one of you.
Yeah, of course. No, it will be for sure. It'll only be us two, so don't worry. But yeah, honestly, Charlene, big love. We really appreciate you coming. It's great to hear about your rebrand as well. And also, side note, on our call, whoever, if it's me or Anthony, we can talk about monetization as well.
Yeah.
We have something very new that we've been doing with people. It's quite exciting. I think it would work quite well for your niche as well. We'll talk about that on the call. But yeah, I've got lots of good ideas. Can't wait to chat. Again, thank you so
same here.
much.
Peace and love, everybody. You did great.
Thank you.